I loved the first M3GAN film. I was very much looking forward to M3GAN 2.0, and unfortunately I think it's not a good sequel. I won't necessarily outright say it's not a good film, but I don't think it's a good sequel, and the problem there is that fans of the first film are less likely to enjoy this as a sequel, and if people didn't care for the first film, they're not going to bother watching the sequel, so there's not really a huge audience for this, or at the very least, not many people are likely to enjoy it. Purely in my opinion, I will of course expand on this. This was released last year in 2025. It's written and directed by Gerard Johnstone, with a cast including Allison Williams, Violet McGraw, Amie Donald, Jenna Davis, and various others. And the first film, I won't go into too much detail, but the first film involved an animatronic doll who becomes friends with this young girl, and then the doll becomes too self-aware and starts to, well, do some very horrific things, and it is a horror. And actually, I didn't realise this until just now, in fact, but Wikipedia does list the first film as a sci-fi horror film, and it mentions that M3GAN 2.0 is a sci-fi action film. And this is the biggest issue. I will talk about the narrative in a moment, but the biggest issue is that this is not a horror film. People who like the first film will like it primarily because it is a horror film with sci-fi elements. There is no horror in this film at all in the sequel, so people who like the first film are not going to get what they expect with the sequel. There will be a small pocket of people who love both films, but generally speaking, it's so different from the first film in terms of the tone, in terms of how it feels, that people are going to be disappointed. And there will be people who would actually really enjoy the second film, but why would they ever bother watching it if they didn't like the first film? Why would they pay attention to it to learn that actually it is very different? And I think that they should have just made a completely different film. If this is the story they wanted to tell, they shouldn't have made it as a sequel to M3GAN. They should have given it a completely different title and marketed it completely differently. So they kind of ruined things for themselves by changing it so significantly. The narrative itself, as I said, will have some fans. There will be some people who like it, but they're probably not going to watch it. AMELIA is created as a military weapon, and M3GAN says that she can take that robot down if she's given the chance to be brought back as she once was. The concept itself is fine. Well, if you take M3GAN out of the equation, the story could still work with a little bit of tweaking, and it wouldn't have been marketed as a sequel to M3GAN, because the only similarity is the character. That's it. Everything else feels completely different. The story is fine. Everything is believable within the context of the narrative. It's a good reason for M3GAN's return, I guess. That part of it, I guess, did make enough sense that I was believing it, but I found the specifics of the story to be very dull. Everything works, it's believable, but it's boring. The first film works so well because Cady is such a sweet child, and it really highlights that innocence a lot more, and then things get darker and more evil and dangerous, and that contrast is really powerful, and none of that exists in this film, and that is one of the main reasons why it doesn't work. But also, as I said, it doesn't feel like a horror film, and having a sequel that's in a completely different genre is a really terrible idea. For the reasons that I've outlined, fans of one genre may like the other genre, but it's very rare that somebody would watch a sequel of a horror film not looking for a horror film. So I think they did a really poor thing there. They made a really, really bad decision. They could have told a very similar story, not marketing it as a sequel. Obviously, they did this to capitalise on the success of the first film, but I just think they made too many really poor decisions. It could very easily alienate existing M3GAN fans, and it's not likely to bring in new fans, because as I said, if you don't like the first film, why would you ever bother paying any attention to the sequel? It is tremendously slow. It's quite ugly to look at. There's a very large amount of low, dim lighting. It doesn't have a nice colour palette. Even as a film on its own, it's not that good. The narrative is believable. Things that happen, I'm buying into. But everything else, I just don't think is very well done. It's not terrible, but there's nothing about it that I think is fantastic. I suppose the performances are good, some of the music, good use of sound, that's alright, but that's about it. It's a huge disappointment. Had I never seen the first M3GAN, let's say this wasn't a sequel, and they actually did create a decent film on its own, I would be saying, yeah, it's fine as a one-time watch. It's not that exciting, it's not that nice to look at, but it's okay. But the fact that it's a million miles away from the first film, both in terms of tone and quality, it's just a huge, huge disappointment. And quite frankly, if they do a third film, I don't know if they will be doing a third film, In fact, I've just checked, and apparently there will be a film called Soulmate, release date to be determined. Will I watch it? I don't know. I won't go into too much detail in case you don't want spoilers, but the description on Wikipedia makes it seem like it's also going to be completely different. But at the very least, they're not going under the M3GAN name at the moment. So honestly, unless I hear absolutely raving reviews, I don't think I'll watch it. Maybe I'll change my mind. But for now, I can say that M3GAN 2.0 was a tremendous disappointment. It's not that amazing on its own, but I think they made too many bad decisions. And ultimately, if you're a fan of M3GAN, I don't recommend it. If you're a big fan of the concept and you didn't care for the first M3GAN film, give it a go. You might like it. But if you're looking for a M3GAN sequel, I don't think it's worth it at all.